I've tried to avoid this one.
But we're going there.
I feel like it's time that we go there. Okay, we're going to unpack Division 7A in a little bit, at least try a little bit, okay?
In basic terms.
Yeah. All right, so what's your understanding of Division 7A, Jade? I'm going to throw you under the bus here.
No, go for it, Joe. So Division 7A is a loan agreement that needs to be entered into between a company and its director or shareholder, and it's essentially when someone takes money out of their company when they can't do that because the company owns that money and it's two separate entities. So, and that is something people do get confused about, that even though you may own that company, it's still not your personal money.
Yeah, that's right. So first of all, it is only applicable really to private companies. Private companies, PTY LTDs. There is a little bit of a crossover with that and trusts, but we will not go there today. We're just going to talk about the private company situation at the moment. And like Jade said, we've seen in the past where people might pay themselves a relatively small salary. They might say, we pay ourselves $50,000 a year. They get all the entitlements of that. They get to have low tax rates. They might get family tax benefit. They might get childcare benefit, all sorts of things like that. But they're still pulling out heaps more money than that out of the company for their own private use. And effectively, you should be paying tax on that. Yeah. So what we actually look at is a Division 7A is a debit loan, so money that you owe back to your company.
And the agreement is that the Division 7A agreement is that if you get yourself into this, you do need to pay that back, and there is actually interest on it that's determined by the ATO.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So Division 7A, why it's called that is that's part of the Tax Act that it refers to this, that says you can't have a debit loan to your company, so money that you owe to your company that hasn't either been dealt with in one of a couple of ways. So the first way is obviously you can pay it back. That's obviously a pretty obvious one. The second way is you might have to pay yourself a dividend. And in fact, if you don't deal with this, the ATO would deem that you have a dividend that is going to be recorded and you pay tax on it. And then the third way is to put these loan agreements in place, so the Division 7A loan agreements. And I know you're very familiar with those. So
I do. I draw up the paperwork for them. So we do see them quite often, in all honesty. So it is something that we see with our clients, and a lot of people really don't understand it. And I'm sure you do have to have the conversation quite often, Joe, and try and explain it to people as well.
Yeah, that's right, because there is certain circumstances where Division 7A comes in, and I'm not going to go into those in like whether you've got retained earnings and there's dividend capability and all sorts of bits and pieces like that. But yeah, a lot of people just say, well, this is my company, it's my money, I can do with it like as I like. But obviously that's their opinion and that's not the tax office's opinion. So we have to try and educate them. So usually what we do is when we do have someone who has a Division 7A issue, so they have a loan that they have taken out of the company and haven't paid back, we have a conversation with them about what they can do to address it. And sometimes it might be that they've just put money on their mortgage because they've got an offset account and they could actually put that money back into the company. And if that's the case, we want them to get that money back into the company before the 30th of June, or we do have the opportunity to get that rectified prior to them lodging their tax return, so as in the company tax return. So it must be back in place prior to the lodgement of the tax return or the day it should be lodged. So you can't say, well, I haven't lodged my tax return for 3 years, I don't have to put that money back. It's essentially the day you lodge the tax return or the day it was due to be lodged. So that's the first situation. Can they get the money back in there? The second thing we look at is can they draw a dividend to cover that? And sometimes drawing a dividend is a really, obvious solution, and it might not be very much, and we have that opportunity and it's not going to cause too many issues. So we'll look at that.
And so that means that individual is paying tax on that income as well. So that's the main thing, that people are drawing it out and not paying tax on it.
Totally, that's exactly right. So can they draw that dividend? Is that a possibility? What is the impact of that? And so we'll look at that and see if that's a solution. And if that doesn't become the solution, then we have to draw up these loan agreements. Now, how long do those loan agreements go for, Jade?
7 years.
And how do we determine the interest rate for that?
So the ATO have set interest rates, and they do sometimes update them. But
they do every year.
Yeah, so we will put a link in the show notes if you are interested to go and have a look at what the interest rates are, but it's all set by the ATO. So we don't sit here and calculate the interest rate for you. It's all by the ATO.
Yeah, so the current rate for the 2022 year is 4.52%. For the 2023 year, it's 4.77%. No surprises at 2024, which haven't been issued yet. I've no doubt that's going to be a hell of a lot higher.
Yep, that's right.
Interest rates are higher. Obviously, it is pegged to that. Another thing is the interest rate gets reset every year. So the loan period doesn't get reset, but the interest rate does. So if you took out a loan, 2 years ago, it would have been set at whatever the rate was at that time. The next year, you now only have 6 years to repay it with a different interest rate and what have you. So the interest rate gets reset every year. There is the opportunity to go for a longer period loan, but I think that's going to be, there's been legislation in the background to rectify the Division 7A issues for quite some time, and we feel like we're getting closer to that happening. So there was the opportunity to actually have a 20-year loan. It had to be secured over a property, over some sort of property or something like that. Most people don't go with that.
No.
Because it is, that is a difficult situation to try and actually have that all in place. So for the the vast majority of people, it's this 7-year thing that we have in place.
And so, Jo, what can people do to make sure that they don't get in this situation? Can they pay themselves a higher salary out of the company?
Yeah, I think that's like one of the bigger things is like, well, how much do you need and how can you manage that with your company? And we just spent a few days talking about cash flow
and personal budgets.
And I think one of those is to actually understand what you do need to draw out of your company to live off, and then try and make sure that your budget actually or your wages reflect that. You aren't your company. Yes, you're the owner of your company, but you are not your company. You're a separate entity to that. And leaving the money in the company so that it's taxed at 25% means you do have to leave that money in the company. It doesn't mean you can use it. It's a better tax rate in the company, that's fine, but it's not your money until you've either done something else to get that money out. But I think paying adequate wages is the first step. Probably, like we've said over the last few weeks, is having that personal budget organised so you know how much money you need to draw out realistically.
Exactly right.
And then if there is the circumstance where you do need to take a little bit extra out, then maybe talk to your accountant about, can I draw a dividend? Sometimes dividends are quite tax effective way to get money out of the business. What's the best way to do it? But just don't use that bank account as your personal bank account.
That's right. So if you're out at the grocery store and you're a bit low in your personal account, don't start using the company card to pay for things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So, look, it is a major issue. If you're with your accountant and they're talking about, hey, you've got a Division 7A issue, just to put it really simply, it means you've taken more money out of the company than you've put into it. You owe the company back money, and your accountant has to work with you to find a way to rectify that so that the tax office aren't coming knocking and saying, well, we're just going to assess it for you anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, if in doubt, always talk to your accountant, because it's better to get on top of it rather than it getting out of control.
Okay.